Our first writer is a supervisor at her work. She says, I have an employee who is angry and aggressive. She blew up at another employee, and now I've got to talk to her about it. So how do I go about having this conversation? When conversations are going to be difficult, as it almost certainly will be with an employee who's angry and aggressive, it's counterintuitive. You'd think that if somebody was aggressive, that you would say, now, don't take this the wrong way, or I'm not being critical, or whatever. We tend to preface what we're going to say to these people. As soon as you preface what you're going to say, you're already showing that you're uncertain, that you're not confident, that you're weak. So you cannot be tentative with somebody who's aggressive. All it does is reflect your fear. Do not be apologetic. You tell the employee, who has a reputation for being angry and aggressive, how she comes across to people. So an example, you might say, you probably don't realize this, but you come across to people as irritated a lot. When you say things, you come across as aggressive. And the interaction that you had the other day with the other employee is just a more extreme example of the way that you come across to people all the time. And then at that point, she will almost certainly argue with you and tell you that it was not her fault and she didn't do this. And that's when you've really got to get clear. You say, this isn't a discussion about whether you do this. You do this. So you have to tell her that she's aggressive, that she does come across as combative. But you say to her, I'm sure you've heard this before. I'm sure you've had this trouble before. But the difference is I'm telling you for your benefit. Because if you keep doing it, it's going to affect the way you interact with others. People will avoid you. You will find it harder to find people who will cooperate with you. And eventually, it's going to affect your job. So I'm telling you this not to correct you, not to make you feel bad, not to criticize you. I'm telling you to help your job, to help you. If you're confident as you say it and kind, you might get across to her. But you got to remember, this is a result of a lifetime of pain. So she may simply argue with you and refuse to hear what you have to say. Whichever way it goes, you say, I'm going to talk to you again in 2 weeks. And I'm going to talk to you about how you've been doing. If it's not any better, I anticipate that it will be. I hope that it will be. But if it's not, then we'll put a note in your employee record. And then eventually that's going to become a problem. So if you need any help from me, how to say something better to somebody when you can feel your anger rising, let me know. You could even tell her your own experience with anger, that anger comes from deep inside. It comes from the pain of a lifetime, which we then take out on other people. So you emphasize, I'm not criticizing, I'm trying to help you. And I'll help you between now and our next assessment in 2 weeks. But this has got to stop. I've employed a lot of people in my life. And if people made mistakes of simple incompetence, I figured that mostly it was my job to train them better. They could make all manner of mistakes. But people who either gossiped or were combative or angry or not teachable, we put up with that one time. No kidding. Once. Then we had a nice, clean, clear discussion about it, like I'm recommending to you. And if they kept it up, they were gone. Because that kind of attitude spreads like a disease among the other employees. They avoid her. Other employees raise the level of their arguing. It's an infection. You have to get rid of it. Can't be tolerated. Next person, Mike, we'll call him Mike, says to me, Susie, his wife, is moody again today, and said it much in that tone of voice. And I said, so what did she say? He said that she told him that he was being gruff. And he said, but I don't see how she could say that. I'm not making this up. She was telling him he was gruff, and he's going, I don't see how she could say that I'm gruff. Because sometimes I tell her things like, you're doing a nice job. Emotionally clueless. So I explained to him, it sounds good to tell her that she's doing a good job, but it's really not helpful to her. She's all of her life been earning people's approval. So hearing from you, you're good because you do a nice job, that's exactly what she's been hearing all of her life, and it would actually tend to make her feel worse. Praise is a real addiction, and many people are addicted to praise in a way that they like it. Other people just hate it because it makes them feel obligated. They've caught on that you can never satisfy everybody. And second, you got to get this part. You really can be gruff. I've known you for a while. I mean, you just have this perpetual frown on your face, and it comes across as I don't love you. That frown has been there for so long, pretty much every time I see you, that you don't realize it anymore. And if you mix the gruff expression on your face and the gruff tone of voice that you often have, the I don't love you, with just a periodic pat on the head and nice job, they don't average out. So what you're doing is you're smacking her in the face with a shovel every day and then periodically saying, nice work. People don't respond well to that. Losing feels worse than winning feels good. And that tone of voice you have and the expression on your face really does come across badly. And we can work on that more on the phone, by Skype, whatever. But everybody who's listening has either had that gruff expression and tone of voice, or has somebody in their life who's close to them who does it. So we can all learn from this. The I don't love you message is devastating. And then we wonder, well, what? I didn't say anything. Yeah, you really did. A man said, he wrote this to me the other day, and I was really kind of puzzled. He said, I was taught by a wise man that my worth is based on other people's love. I hope not. But I think I understand where that came from. People hear something like on video chats or read something in a book, and they change just a word or two and makes it completely screwed up. The truth is that the love of another person is not the basis for your worth, but another person's love is powerful evidence of your worth. In fact, if I truly love you, assuming that I'm not insane, without wanting anything from you, that does prove your worth. But your worth isn't based on my love. You don't become worthwhile because I love you. My love for you simply is overwhelming evidence that you're worthy of love. After all, if I love you, how could you be unworthy? I wouldn't be loving you if you were unworthy. So it's just evidence. It's not the basis of somebody being lovable. So I hope there were not too many others who were confused about that. I know a woman who was raised by an insane mother. Half the people who are listening are going, that's me. I mean, literally insane, like as in and out of mental institutions. And I asked how she was doing after the conversation that we had the night before. And she said, oh, I'm surviving. I haven't recovered from last night. The conversation that she and I had, which was really very mild. She said, maybe my inner dialogue is my worst enemy. I love self-help speak. No, it's not really your inner dialogue. It's your mother's voice you're hearing. No 4-year-old decides whether they'll be worthwhile or not. They just hear whether they're worthwhile or not in the tone of voice used by their parents. It's your mother's voice. It's all past stuff. It's all lies. Now, how do I know that it's lies? How do I know it was past stuff? You were told by an unloving and crazy person what your value was, dependent on whether you made her happy. That's what all parents do. They don't smile when the child necessarily does the right thing, although some parents do. Mostly parents smile when their children do what the parents like. That's what matters. So the fact that a kid gets out there and plays baseball and does his very best and he strikes out, a loving parent just cheers and claps and smiles that the kid did the best he could. An unloving parent cheers and claps and smiles only when the kid gets a hit or a home run or gets a run batted in or whatever, because it makes them look good. How do I know? What difference does it make whether a kid gets a home run? It's meaningless. But if the other parents look over at the parent and say, wow, is that your kid? See, it's just entirely self-serving. And that's what your mother did. So your value depended on whether you made her happy, which, because she was crazy, was impossible, which is true of most of our parents. So of course you were worthless because you could never make her happy. Nobody could, which is why she went in and out of mental institutions. Now, most of our parents didn't go in and out of mental institutions, but most of our parents were just as unhappy. Solution: replace the past dialogue, as you called it, which are really just judgments, with how somebody feels towards you who really cares about you. Now, me, for example, or somebody else that you know, which is true. Now, how do you know that when I tell you I love you that it's true and what your mother said wasn't true? Because I don't need you to change. My opinion of you is not prejudiced. It's not colored or tainted by whether you make me happy. I'm already happy. I don't need you to do anything to make me happy. So my opinion of you is clean. It's not distorted. She said, the hardest part, after I said all that, she said, the hardest part is trying so hard, and this woman does work hard, and still getting it wrong. The hard part is not being wrong. The hard part is that you are taught that wrong means you're bad. Being wrong is just being alive. In the process of learning, we have to be wrong. It's when we got the frowns when we were wrong. When we were wrong. When you're wrong, you're bad. Your mistakes make you unworthy and unlovable, which is not true. Now, how can you know that? Because when I tell you that you're wrong, you don't feel bad. You've even told me that. You've said, I don't feel bad when you tell me that I'm wrong. Of course not, because you can tell that I'm telling you what's wrong or what you're doing wrong just because it doesn't work, because it doesn't make you happy. I'm telling you that you're wrong for you, not for me. In fact, you're often wrong, as in the assumptions you made about our conversation last night when you felt bad after talking to me. But it doesn't make you bad. Her last comment was, so how does this conscious understanding, because she understood what I was saying, get into my unconscious? Two things: repetition, repeating over and over again that there's somebody who really loves you, and trusting. We were born trusting. We trusted these people who lied to us. So it really stuck. We have to learn to untrust what we were told in the past that was lies, and learn to trust people who can see us clearly. That's not a small trick, but if we make a decision to do it and we work at doing it every day, we really can change our opinions about everything, including ourselves, most notably. Here's somebody who writes, feeling loved changes everything. I was just saying that, oddly. For example, I've been keeping my opinions about what other people do to myself. They don't want my opinions. Bless your heart to realize that. And my comments don't make me feel good either. It's making a difference. Yesterday when I got home, my husband was there watching television. Normally, he wouldn't even look up or acknowledge my existence coming in the door. But this time he got up from the couch and gave me a real hug. Not the kind that comes from obligation, a long hug. I loved it. And we're not having little snotty comments back and forth anymore. All because I've learned to shut up and not share my opinion about everything. I like this way of living. And I feel sad that everybody doesn't live that way. Well, that's sweet of you. But look what a difference it makes. I watch people every single day feel like they just have to express their opinion about everything. Somebody does something and they say, oh, I wouldn't put that many onions in the whatever dish it is. Well, who cares? Why is it you think everybody's fascinated by your opinion? So why do people constantly offer their opinion when nobody wants it? Because we've been made to feel worthless. We've been made to feel valueless from the time we were little kids. And if we offer our opinion constantly, it makes us feel just a little more important. I discovered when I went into drug treatment, and I'd been there for several days, that nobody missed my opinion at all. My feelings were hurt. The sun rose without my help. The whole world got along while I was in drug treatment. It was really quite offensive. We need to see that we don't have to express our opinion. We can just keep our mouths shut. This next person says, I took a new teaching job at a high school, and I'm having the time of my life thanks to real love. I love this job. I'm able to love and care for not only the kids that I teach, but the teachers as well. I don't need or want anything from the kids or the adults. I feel free. Oh, is that a great feeling or what? I have much more energy to do things, and I don't have to worry about making mistakes. Isn't it great feeling free? It's just wonderful. You continue. And if I do make mistakes, I just clean them up and let them go. Wow, who knew? Even a slow learner like me can change. Who knows, I might spontaneously combust if I feel any more loved. I've never heard that before. Carry a fire extinguisher. It's a wonderful freeing feeling to not live that old way anymore. It's just outstanding. Here's a man who, I'm going to talk about a man, hang on a second, who has been practicing real love with his family for 6 months or so. And he wrote this. He said, we had a family meeting yesterday that went beautifully. But the coolest thing is that my wife, Suzanne, was amazing yesterday and this morning. I wanted to tell you about it. I know she's feeling hormonal, but she hasn't been cranky or short with me or the boys at all or killed anybody. Isn't that great? Everything changes when people feel loved. It used to be that when she was feeling hormonal, heads rolled, people died, she tortured small animals. When we feel loved, pain of every description diminishes, including physical pain, hormonal pain, whatever. Everything changes. You've been loving her, and she's been calling other people for loving support. The whole thing is just working together in a beautiful mosaic. You continue. Yesterday, Suzanne, my wife, told our 9-year-old Billy that he needed to have his schoolwork and his chores done by 6 p.m. if he wanted to play with his friends the next day, Saturday. When I got home at 5:47, 13 minutes before 6 o'clock, I checked on his progress. he hadn't started his 20 minutes of reading. For those of you who are mathematically challenged, if you have 20 minutes of reading to do, you can't squeeze it into 13 minutes, much to the disappointment of most children who put things off to the last second. And he hadn't emptied the dishwasher. So I told Billy, well, it looks like you're not going to have enough time to get things done by 6 o'clock. So he ran into the next room to talk to my wife, hoping to get, a different opinion. But Suzanne, the new, unbelievable Suzanne, explained the rules to him again. Billy said, well, but now I can't get my reading done in time. See, apparently he doesn't need math help because he knows that 13 is less than 20. He said, I can't get my reading done in time. And Suzanne said, no, you really can't, where she would have saved him before. Billy asked if it would be okay if he started his reading then. And Suzanne went, nope, too late. Billy started to argue that he didn't understand the rules. And Suzanne said, oh no, we went over the rules earlier and I asked you if you understood the rules. And you said, oh yes, because then you were going to go and play video games. So then Billy, kids, if parents show the slightest crack of weakness, it's like watching squirrels run for trees when they're scared. They will find something to argue about. So, well, can I do it now? He even tried this one. Billy said, why should I have to learn to read? And he asked if he really had to do it. And Suzanne said, oh no, you don't have to do your reading, but then you'll have to do twice as much tomorrow, and you won't get to play video games at all. So Billy went and emptied the dishwasher and did his reading right then. This was huge because this would have been a family argument till they went to bed and passed. This is great stuff for everybody who's listening. Changing a lifetime pattern of pick a thing, lying, being irresponsible, rescuing, people-pleasing, whatever. Suzanne changed the pattern of a lifetime right here. It's a miracle. We have to establish irrevocable rules of life for ourselves and our kids, and we'll be happier if we live by them. There was a book that came out recently on the subject of resilience, the ability to bounce back from difficult things. And they listed just a tiny little handful, I think it was 4 things, that they discovered that people who have this quality, resilience, have. And one of those 4 or 5 few things was that they have to have unchanging standards because it makes them stable. Most kids don't have unchanging standards because the parents change the rules on a whim. If the kid cries, then they change the rules. If the kid cries, he doesn't have to do his homework. If the kid fusses, No, that's what rules are for, is to help us to be happier, not for controlling us. It's what God does with us, is gives us rules so we can be happier. It's glorious to keep standards. Because what happens then is if we keep the standards, opportunities or additional choices become available to us that otherwise would not have been. Keeping rules, paradoxically, makes us free. Keeping rules sounds like it's constricting. No, not at all. So, for example, if a train decides to break the rules and jump off the track, how free is it? No. Trains on the track are free to go all over the country because they keep the rules. They stay on the track. If a plane is approaching for a landing and it decides, I don't like the fact that the control tower gave me a vector or a descent angle, I'm going to make up my own. Everybody dies and the plane's destroyed. Rules set us free. If we keep the rules of happiness, we can choose to be happy. Here's the cool thing. If you keep the rules of happiness, you can also choose to be miserable if you want. If you don't keep the rules of happiness, happiness is not a choice. You can only choose to be miserable. Kind of like I would teach my kids many years ago about education. Why do I have to go to school? I mean, all kids go through that. I said, well, you don't have to. But if you go to school and you get good grades and you decide to get an advanced degree, you can always go back and shovel coal, dig ditches, apply for permanent disability. You can do nothing with good grades and an advanced degree. But if you get crappy grades and a limited degree and you decide, I want to be a nuclear physicist, good luck. You cut that choice out by not keeping the rules. So guidelines free us. He continues. This morning when we got up, Suzanne told the boys that we'd be leaving for school at 8:40. And when she pestered Billy to get out of the shower, I calmly asked her if I could talk to her. Brilliant. Instead of correcting her in front of Billy, he said, could I talk to you just for a second? And I suggested that we just let him do his own thing instead of nagging him. And she said, okay. And I could tell that she meant it. No nagging. That's one of the rules of happiness. No kidding. It's heaven. It's wonderful. You teach him responsibility instead of just teaching him to respond to the unbearable pain of nagging, which is no great life lesson. You continue. We walked out of the door at 8:40 when the timer went off. And the youngest son stood on the porch and complained that his bag was too heavy and he made grunting noises. Now, mind you, he's old enough to go to school, but he's going, like he couldn't carry his backpack, which in the past, his mother would have saved him every time and gone back and picked up his backpack. And she started to go help him. And I called her and I said, he'll be okay. Let's go. She stopped, didn't argue, and came to walk with me to the car. And sure enough, he caught up with us before we even got past the driveway. Of course, we were moving in the car. So that hurried him up. Each of these are wonderful accomplishments. For everybody who's listening, it doesn't sound like a big thing, but these are people who are changing entire life patterns. They were on their way to divorce. They were on their way to raising two spoiled, rotten, entitled kids. And they've avoided all of that indescribable pain that with each passing year becomes harder and harder to avoid. I just talked to a family today where the parents didn't do this, did not change the direction of their family. To a mother and several of the children in the family who are all adults. And now the changes that are going to happen in the family are going to be extraordinarily painful. It took a great deal of pain for everybody to decide that they didn't want to live like this anymore. It's much easier to teach kids these principles when they're younger. He continues, we dropped the kids off at school and Suzanne stood outside, kissed the boys, let Billy walk the youngest one to his class. She asked them if they wanted us to stay outside and wait until we were sure they'd gotten to class. Her old over-mothering stuff. And I said, oh, they'll be fine. The school will take care of them if they get lost. And she held my hand and came along. This is somebody who was just such an overprotective mother. Mothers think that being concerned for their children is good. And we've talked about this before. All it does is convey fear and lack of confidence in the kid. Doesn't help the child. After we dropped the boys off at school, I told Suzanne that I thought the morning had gone really well. I have a habit of repeatedly telling the boys how much time is left before a timer goes off. And Suzanne pointed out that that's nagging too. Good for her. I agreed and suggested that we just give Billy a clock and tell him we're never going to nag him again. After all, Billy's 9 years old. He's old enough to read time. And it's his responsibility to keep track of time. And we will leave when the timer goes off. And if he wants to go to school naked, he can. Everyone, not everyone, most of my children went to school in their pajamas because they weren't ready on time. Want to guess how many times they did that? Once. Because when you go to school in your pajamas, other kids don't find that a mature behavior. And getting laughed at by your peers is a real motivator. Responsibility. Parents tend not to teach children responsibility. And the younger you do it, the easier it is. And it was all done, you continue, without Suzanne or me or the boys getting frustrated or upset. It's like a piece of heaven on earth. I'm so happy and full of gratitude this morning. I wanted to share it with you and let you know how grateful and loved I'm feeling. It's never too late to change the way we live. We might have been raised by irresponsible parents or parents who didn't know how to love us, but we can learn to do it differently. And this man's story is just one of many examples that proves that it's possible. Here's somebody who says, I'm married with 2 small children, and we live in Spain, close to my husband's parents. And as an American, living in Spain has been a big challenge for me. Yeah, you think? Life's not hard enough, being married and having little children without living in a foreign, not just a place where they speak a foreign language, but where there's a different culture. I lived for 2 years in the islands of the South Pacific, and I learned that learning a culture is at least as hard as learning a language. People live differently. They think differently. It's a tough thing to adjust to. You continue. On top of that, my mother-in-law is a very controlling person. So apparently we have those in all cultures. And it's difficult for me to be around her. I've been finding my worth and learning to be more assertive with my mother-in-law. If you don't, she'll tend to control you even more. She'll tend to bully you even more. She wouldn't be doing this if she hadn't already been successful in bullying and intimidating and controlling her own children. You're next. You continue. Now, my parents-in-law, my mother-in-law and her husband, are looking to buy a house for all of us to live in. So them and my husband and me and the kids. There are some financial, advantages to that. But let's see here, especially since I've been having some health issues, and it might be advantageous to have my mother-in-law around when I'm not feeling particularly well and when I can't do things on my own. The problem is that living with my mother-in-law is so challenging and emotionally draining for me, and I don't want to have to live with her. I don't think I can live if I have to live with her, even if living with her means that I receive help from them. My husband, however, is agreeing with his parents, as he tends to do. Gee, duh, because he has a controlling mother and he's used to it. My husband agrees that it would be the best decision for all of us. And he told me today that my opinion doesn't matter because the majority rules in favor of the house. And everybody wants the house but me, so too bad. And because I don't contribute financially to the house, I don't have a choice. This is a truly horrible story and a terrible thing to say to you. Why? Lots of reasons. Let's do 3 out of 100. The basic unit of the family is not the mother-in-law and all her slaves. That's not the basic unit of a family. The basic unit is the couple, or in many families, the single person. And marriages aren't ruled by other people, certainly not by in-laws, or the marriage becomes a sham. You both just become slaves to the mother-in-law. It becomes an extension of your mother-in-law. If you let her rule you or your husband, you will become a perpetual child. You'll move backward a step in life. When you married your husband, the vows, think about them, were between you two. The marriage vows were not between you and your mother-in-law or between both of you and you're a mother-in-law. So that's one reason it's a horrible thing to say. Second reason, in marriages, all major decisions, especially changes from the way things presently are made by unanimous agreement. When you two married, the understanding was that you two were a family. You two were a family the instant you were married. And you decided together to live together as a couple and not with the mother-in-law. Then you brought in two children, still as a separate family unit. All these decisions were made jointly. That is the status quo. That's how things are. In order for the status quo to change, you both have to agree. If you don't both agree to live together with the extended family, then you have to stay with the default decision, the status quo, which was that you're living together as a couple, as you have to this point. Third reason, when you married, you agreed to love and support each other. You did not say that whoever made the money would make the decision. Go back and reread your marriage vows and see if it says that. See if it says, I promise to honor you and, love you and take care of you, but if you don't make any money, then I don't have to listen to you anymore. I don't think it said that. That elevation of the role of money is just plain wrong. It's a thing that we find in society everywhere. Whoever makes the money makes the decisions. Well, in a business, maybe, but this isn't a business, it's a family. If anybody should make the decisions in a family, it would be the one who raises the kids, you. And I'm not saying this should be so. I'm just highlighting that money is certainly not the primary factor in making decisions. You might need help with your health, but if your emotional health is damaged by a controlling mother-in-law, your stress will make you sicker no matter how much physical help she gives you. So imagine now, if you're still having trouble with this decision, imagine your most miserable experiences to this point being controlled by your mother-in-law, the ones you've already had. Now imagine those experiences getting much worse, because they will. If you think she's controlling when you live close, for those of you who don't know this person, this mother-in-law comes into this woman's house, rearranges the furniture and rearranges the clothes in the drawers, does whatever she wants to. If you think she's controlling now, wait till you live in the house that she rules. You will become like a child or a slave. It's a nightmare. You conclude, it really hurt me when he said that, my husband. And I don't know how to make my needs and wishes about the living arrangement be accepted and complied with by my husband and my in-laws. Darling, you can't please everybody. First, you have to be emotionally and mentally healthy. That's so obvious, because if you're not emotionally and mentally healthy, you got nothing. You got nothing to bring to a marriage, nothing to bring to your children. Then, when you're emotionally healthy, you decide what's best for your marriage and your kids, and the opinion of your in-laws would come a distant millionth. So, if you let this happen, you're going to really regret the day you did. If that means planting your feet and just saying, I will not move. You can move by yourself, but I'm staying here with our children. It will be far more stressful even than you can imagine at this point. Here's somebody who says, let's see. This is a woman who cut back on contact with her sister while she was in the process of learning real love, because her sister was confusing and distracting to her. Her sister had been raised in the same crazy house that she had, and she just found it confusing to communicate with her sister who lives in another country. The expectations of her sister, the reminder of how she was raised, and so on, tends to be tough. Now they're back in contact, and the sister makes occasional references to real love, defends the way that she's living, says she's very happy and she doesn't need that real love stuff. But then she complains about her life, about difficulties with her husband, with her children, with her parents, and so on, the kind of things that would be the subject of a discussion in a real love group. And the woman writing, whose sister we've been talking about, says, what can I say when my sister defends how happy she is when I know she's not? You're not in a real love group, kid. And your sister hasn't asked you for help. So you don't really have a right to tell her that she's lying or hiding or whatever. If she says she's happy, you just say, well, then I'm just really glad for you. Just engage her right where she is. And if she wants to hide and lie, let her. You continue. So what if she shares something that's difficult for her? Like she's having difficulty with her husband, or something where a real love coach could really help her. Do I still not say anything? If she describes a difficulty in her life, you might say that you've learned that there's a happier way for you. Don't say there's a happier way for her. I've had similar experiences with my husband, and I've found a happier way, but I have no agenda whether you want to hear what I have to say. Then it's up to her if she asks for more. If she asks for more, then you could say, well, I can tell you a little bit about this, but there's a book that explains it better, or a wise person who explains it better. But you've got to really have no agenda. If your agenda is to change her or teach her, she's going to know, and it's not going to go well. Turns out that this woman has pointed her sister in the direction of a wise person before, but her sister just kept saying that her life is great. So she continues. So by saying that her life is great, is she saying, I'm not really interested in talking to a wise person? Yeah, it's exactly what she's saying. By not following up with the wise person you recommended, your sister has said with her behavior that she's not interested in pursuing it. And she has the right not to pursue it. So listen to her. You continue. So then do I just offer support and understanding? Yeah. Continuing. You conclude, in fact. She says she wants a less superficial relationship with me. But I think she means that she just wants somebody that she can stay miserable with and complain to, like we have done in the past before I learned about real love. It will be kind of weird not to share real love with her. It's like, it's a new way of living. She probably does want somebody to complain to. But you will find ways to interject real love more subtly into the conversation. She might complain about her child, and you'll tell her what you have learned about parenting. Or as I said earlier, she'll complain about her husband, and you'll say how you learned to be more loving with your husband. But you won't be giving her advice. And you don't have to use any real love language. You just describe how you've learned to listen better, to understand him better, to be more loving and compassionate and talk to him differently. She doesn't have to feel like she's being taught real love at all. There are so many ways that we can teach people real love without ever using that two-word phrase. Here's a woman who talked to me in person, and she said, I woke up in a panic. There was nothing I could do. The panic just got worse and worse. And I said, I believe that it got worse and worse. I believe that you were in a panic, but no, there was something that came before the panic. She said, no, I woke up that way and I couldn't get rid of it. So now to everybody who's listening, that's not how it goes. Remember, it's event, judgment, feeling, reaction. Sometimes there doesn't even have to be an event, but there's always a judgment that precedes the feeling. Panic, what she called it, is fear. So what can you do? Or how can you understand this better? Fear is always preceded by a judgment, whether we're aware of it or not, even if we wake up with it. In our dreams, we make judgments. How many of us have had really bad dreams? Dreams are filled with judgments that are just unfiltered. Just your conscious brain is asleep and your unconscious mind just throws up clouds of horse poop. And our judgments, our wrong judgments, our past judgments are mixed in all of that. You see a bear as you're walking along in the woods and he raises up and snarls at you. Bears don't cause panic, because if you saw one in a zoo, you wouldn't be panicked. So bears don't cause panic. No, first you have to make a judgment. Bear standing up snarling at me, weighs 1,200 pounds, might eat me painfully. Now we're afraid. Now we panic. So there's always a judgment. And then you said you couldn't get rid of it. Yes, I agree with you, but only because you were stuck in old thinking, seeing few to no choices. She was a little annoyed here that I didn't buy into her notion that panic is a completely involuntary experience. She said, so what do you expect me to do? That was where I got the idea that she was annoyed. I said, I don't expect you to do anything. But see, you came to me and asked me for a solution. I didn't come to you and ask you if you had woke up this morning with a panic attack. And I'm just offering a solution. Before your feeling, you do have a judgment. So what's the solution? Change the judgment, and the feeling will change. Always. Just like you see a bear. Well, if the bear's in a cage of heavy steel, poof, your judgment changes, you're not afraid. Panic can't survive a correct judgment. She said, well, how can I change a judgment if I don't even know what it is? Now, that's a very smart question. We don't even have to know what the old judgment is. We just need to remember what's true. Just recall all of our true judgments, or some of them. For example, you wake up in the morning, you're in a panic. What's the truth? The truth is nothing bad is happening to me right now. That's the truth. That's a true judgment. Kind of hard to be afraid if nothing bad is happening. I have no reason to suppose that something bad is going to happen in 5 minutes, do I? No real evidence. That's another true judgment. Getting harder for fear to survive. I have people who love me. God loves me. No matter what happens, I have what matters most. I have love in my life, so I'll be okay. Those are all true judgments. So now it doesn't matter what the old judgment was. You're living by a correct judgment, and the fear will disappear. Now, it turns out we really kind of can know what the old judgment was. If you woke up in a panic, you were feeling worthless. Or you were afraid that something bad would happen, even though there's no evidence, that work would be unbearable, your husband would be irritated at you, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't really matter. All stupid, wrong thinking judgments. When we remember what's true, fear can't survive. I talked to a woman who said, work is so intimidating. And I said, no, work is difficult. Work is intimidating, that's a feeling, only if you're afraid. Because you are intimidated. But that's a choice. Or she said, well, there's just so much politics at work. Same woman, same conversation. Maybe. But when you're afraid, everything seems frightening or confusing or like a conspiracy, which is pretty much the definition of politics, right? So your fear creates all of these judgments. First you have wrong judgments, then you get afraid, and then you create even more wrong judgments to justify your fear. Do you see? Or she said, I hate my job because so many changes are made at the last minute. I said, help me understand, but Hasn't that always been the case, that changes happen at the last minute at your job as information is gathered? Well, yes, and don't they pay you to take care of last minute changes? Well, yes, but it's stressful. No, it's not. You choose to see it as stressful because if it's last minute, you don't have as much time to prepare and you might make a mistake, proving once again that you're worthless. So, no, work is not intimidating. Politics are not frightening. Changes made at the last minute don't cause stress. It's our fears that do all that, our judgments. So what do? You do your best at work. They're paying you to do your best. They're not paying you to be perfect. There's nobody at work who is. And you can't do your best while you're afraid. So mostly we make our lives into what they are. And fear just kills us. So what's the solution? Do what we've talked about, a million times. We find sufficient love in our lives. We trust the love that we're given. We remember it even when we're not being actively loved in that moment. And then we share it with the people around us. And if we do that, we carry around with us a cloak of happiness, if you like, a cloak of invincibility. And everything goes better. It's a promise. I'll see you in a week.